Hello, and welcome to Voices for Mental Health, the podcast where we engage in real talk about mental illness and share personal experiences from everyday people, mental health peers, and experts in the field. I'm your host, Candace Schoner, along with my co-host, Carrie Kerwick. On today's episode, we will be speaking with Ginger Germani, a mental health advocate. In 2017, Ginger's world changed forever when her son Austin died by suicide while at college. Since then, she has been on a mission to promote mental health education and make support more accessible for young people across the country. Ginger, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Candace. Hi, Carrie. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Well, let's kind of start in the beginning. You grew up in Richmond. Can you share a little bit about your upbringing and how it shaped your outlook on mental health?
As a traditional, right in the middle of Gen X, I think that my experience with mental health has been, what I've noticed from my peers and my close friends is that we all have pretty similar experiences in that we were sort of the first generation to have brought to light the fact that generational trauma exists and that there's actually something we can do about it to break that cycle. I believe what I witnessed in my parents and my friends similar. There was not, a lot of our society was very much there was a lot of survival out there. Mental health was not something that was talked about, wasn't necessarily understood. And I think that most of it, if you look at sort of what common society looked like, I think a lot of it was sort of covered up by some good old fashioned having a drink. And that was sort of the best and most readily way to relieve things that were actually mental health related issues. And as we, Gen X, I am 50, as I grew older, I grew into the same survival mode. I utilized whatever mechanisms I could develop as a child with a not fully formed brain for survival, which is at that point, seeking love and safety. What do love and security look like? And so those habits that I developed of how I got my perceived love and security from my family, they weren't healthy ones. And they caused me a lack of boundaries because as a child, you don't understand boundaries. You understand that first and foremost, security and love. Security and love is what you're seeking. You want to feel safe and loved. And so you do what you have to do to earn that, to feel like you have that. And that develops into how you carry that into your adult life, how you carry that into relationships going forward throughout throughout your youth, throughout young adulthood, throughout the relationships you develop as a child, because that is how your mind is trained. Our minds are completely trainable. So what I don't think was understood at that point was the fact that these behaviors that we were creating to give ourselves a sense of security are they good or bad ones? What are boundaries? Why are we supposed to have boundaries? None of that was ever a part of the conversation. And also Gen X is sort of the first generation to experience divorce. Divorce was not, when my parents got divorced in 1985, when I was 10 years old, I had one other friend who happens to be my best friend to this day. So we have numerous conversations about our experiences and what we did. So that is one of those things that also had all of a sudden you had a split family. And how did you operate in that dynamic? And now you had two different dynamics that you were seeking love and security within. So that is really, that was the beginning of my journey. And I can tell you at 50 years old, I'm still working to reform practices, but I was not educated and didn't understand enough about myself to do that until, over the last probably 8 years.
So because of that, we develop those patterns, the stinking thinking, the patterns of relationships, and the generational trauma continues, right? So how did your healing journey begin, especially when it comes to understanding and breaking those patterns of generational trauma?
Yes. So my true healing journey did not begin until the loss of my oldest son in 2017. I lost him to suicide from his own mental health struggles. And what had happened during that time, if you look at that, I was 42 years old. And at 42 years old, I had been married and divorced 3 times. And no matter what I can say about the person on the other side of that marriage, the common denominator was my choices that I was making based on how I felt about myself, how I felt about my own self-worth, and if I was good enough, and what I needed to keep doing to get someone to love me. And my fear of being alone, because I had never been alone, because I didn't have confidence in my own self, that my own security and safety comes from myself. So I really hadn't begun to put me together from the last divorce and really iron that out. And once he died, all the pieces were in the floor. All the pieces were in the floor. So at that point, I said, I've got a lot of work to do. This is going to take a long time. And how do I do this to become the best version of myself? Because the only way I am going to survive this is to continue to have purpose, find my way back to finding joy. And none of those things could come from anyone but myself.
Wow. Austin was not your only son, correct? You have a son, Colton, I believe?
Correct. My boys are 15 months apart. I had them when I was 22 and 24. So today, Austin would be 27 and Colton, my younger son, is 26. They both have struggled with their mental health. And Colton was 4 weeks away from turning 18 when his brother died. That turning 18 is very significant in what you can and cannot get your adult children to do, and with regard to, because all of a sudden they're adults, they don't have to do anything they don't want to do. And at that age, there are a lot of different dynamics that go into it, because they do feel themselves to be adults on their own, making their own decisions. So they really still they are in a phase where they don't want to hear that in addition to starting my life, I've got to rebuild something about myself. And I know that a big part of my journey has been being very open with Colton about what I struggle with, how that led to everything he experienced growing up, what owning and telling him, I am sorry you experienced this because I was doing the best I could with the limited information and skill set I had at the time. And why I am encouraging you to get help is because I want this to end with you. If like you have developed bad patterns of attachment because of me, and the only thing I can do at this point is to support you in helping you change that, and to be very honest with you so that you don't have a parent who is denying how you really felt at that time.
Can I just say thank you for being so vulnerable and honest with us about this, because this is a hard topic to talk about. And obviously you've done a lot of work and self-awareness and trying to pass on what you know to your son, and being aware of the importance of his mental health and the importance of keeping an open conversation and being transparent.
Do you have any things that you do for self-care? I mean, for me, I needed to really focus on my self-care and model that for my daughter and you know, people around me. When I'm a survivor of suicide loss myself, so this is a tough conversation for me.
Sorry to hear that. Yeah. So I, you know, there have been multiple things I have done with regard to self-care. The first is regular exercise as frequently as I can, and also being as present as I can in nature during those things. Nature is more healing than we tend to recognize, because it's sort of the environment we've always grown up in. And if you pause and take yourself back to the most simplistic of things, and you just listen to what you hear around you in nature, that is actually really healing. The other piece of that is, you know, I was fortunate to find a very good therapist that I connected with once Austin passed away. I had therapists before that were okay, but one of the most challenging things about getting mental health care is the fact that there is a connection required. It truly is, even though you're paying for it, it's a relationship that has to work. You have to feel that you are understood and heard. So that I encourage people, if you don't have that feeling of this is the one, like any other relationship, this is the one, then keep trying, because once you have the one, you know it. And it really is transformative. And to this day, I still talk with her based on, I'll text her and say, hey, can you work me in next week? And because I know something is going on that I just need to, so much of it I know, but I need to speak it back to her and tell her, you know, we very much talk. I identify all of my responses to adverse situations as what young Ginger would do and what adult Ginger would do. Mm-hmm. Young Ginger is very much always seeking safety and is very, she is very impulsive. My adult self reasons these things out, and it's one of the things that I try to get my son to do. I'm like, you need to write down facts and feelings. When you are dealing with a situation, if we can identify what is a fact and what is a feeling, then we can look at what we can control. And then within that, what can you own? So a big part of my drill has been, when I find situations that I find difficult or that I'm struggling with, I sort of dissect it just so that I can get to the part of what can I own? Because if I can't find what I can own, I can't find what I can have an impact on or change. Mm-hmm. So I'm really big on dissecting. The other big piece, I've really my circle of friends is incredibly small, and the best curated group of friends one can imagine.
Yeah.
Because those are my people.
Totally
Those are my chosen family. I show up how I show up, and we do that for each other. So really, that having that group of people, because if you've got the small right group, that is your key to having security again in other people and being able to trust other people. So that really is trusting other people with your vulnerability. You've got to have a place to practice that out.
Right. Yeah.
And those people can help with that.
Right. And people teach you that they're not a safe place to be able to open up and speak your truth.
Yes.
You know, so you've got to find those people that can reflect the pain back to you, that aren't afraid of your pain and your grief. And that was important for me. My circle was big and it became so small, but it's small and intimate. And I've got the same as you, I've got that right circle of people around me. And they've been a saving grace for me to get through this. Yeah.
They really are. And it does not mean, I mean, I've got so many acquaintances, so many people, acquaintances sounds like it's such a remote put off word, but it's not. It's like, what's a friend? What's an acquaintance? And how do we define these levels? You know what? It really is that you can have layers. There are tiers. I joke, I refer to it as tiers. I'm like, I need my tier ones for this.
I like
and that sounds rude, but the truth is we all have them. And that is, your tier one, that's the most intimate. Mm-hmm. And then there are other people that, yes, you can go socialize with, do things with, but nobody needs to know your whole story or know unless they're pieces that you want to share. And I do tend to share a lot, but when I share, I look at what is my audience for sharing. If I am sharing because I need support, I need to be heard, those are my tier ones. Anything outside of that, when I share, it is solely for the benefit of I may be able to help someone.
Love that. Looking back, and you talked about young Ginger versus current Ginger, what do you wish you had known before you got married, before you had kids, and done differently, if anything, in your life to deal with difficult situations and mental health?
I wish most that I had been taught that my value was not contingent upon any other person. I wish that I think one of what we can't control as young people is what do our parents bring to the table that they are carrying. I had my kids still carrying so much, and that impacted their lives. So really it becomes okay, well, how do we instill this in children, and how do we address that sort of as a community? And we have very much we've become a much more isolated world in terms of we see so many things online, but we don't have as much individual interpersonal interaction. So the thing is that I couldn't control that I had unhealed parents in my life. I couldn't control that I had an older brother who was experiencing the same family, but was processing and developing his own behaviors in different ways. So, what I do wish that I had learned, and where I think things really differ, is that there was I grew up in a time where there was no discussion of mental health. Like my version of mental health was, well, you know that there's a thing where you can kill yourself, but apparently you're going to go to hell if you kill yourself. So you really don't want that. That was when I was growing up, and when I was a teenager, there was the only deterrent out there. And that was the only resource. There wasn't a resource. It was just the flat out statement of, you commit suicide, you're going to hell.
Well, I'm quite a bit older.
That is all I remember.
And I remember that too, and I'm quite a bit older than you, and same thing. And anything related to mental health was sort of brushed under the rug, and you didn't talk about it. And thank God we're at a different time now where we're raising awareness of the importance of talking about it. So for other parents listening who might be in the same situation, what would you say to them right now?
The biggest thing that I would say is, if you have a child that is having a struggle, first look in the mirror. That's the hardest thing to do, because you have brought a child onto this planet that you love. You love them so much, and you know it's an unconditional love. And you know, in my mind, when they were younger, in my mind, I was doing everything I could for them. We are doing the best that we can with the tools, the information that we have at that time. So my younger self, the 20-some-year-old who had young kids, I did not have the tools to be a healthy version of myself. I know that I loved them and I wanted to do, and I did all the things. I took them to all the sports. I participated. I know that you have to treat it as, just because I'm looking at myself first and just because I'm looking at the family first, it doesn't have to mean that I am being critical of myself. Show yourself the same grace that you would show one of your closest friends. And at the same time, find the things that you can own. What are the things that can be owned in our household? What has happened in our household that may have had an impression on them as they have been growing and developing their insight? What things are their external things that, we are in a land of social media and internet presence that we didn't have to experience. And even my children, who would now be 27 and then 26, they didn't have it to the degree that younger generations have it. And I think that I know there are studies that show it, that is really isolating. I mean, my children were still running out to the neighborhood to get all their friends together to do stuff. They were still doing the organic. So there are multiple components, but I would say find the things that you can own and be comfortable being vulnerable, because anytime you lead with vulnerability, that opens up the door for someone else to meet you with their own vulnerability. And if your child sees that you're willing to accept accountability and not push off how they feel or what they feel, it's hard, but it opens up a much better conversation where you can get to what is going on with their core, right, and how that's relating to what's going on with them now.
Right. I want to switch gears just a little bit because we're kind of running out of time. Want to talk about maybe some post-traumatic growth. And was there a moment when you wanted to do something bigger than yourself to help other people and to turn your trauma into a purpose? I have. Before I
really recognized my mental health issues, what my children were dealing with. I was a volunteer for a lot of nonprofit organizations, and a lot of organizations that gave back to the community. And, you know, as I look at it, that is a very healthy, wonderful thing to do. As I look at it, that was where I was beginning to find other ways to make myself feel valuable. So really, that was a big portion of what I would do. And that really, again, helped me once Austin passed away. Was I jumped right into, okay, there's a problem. I have information. I need to contribute to this. And I had developed a fund for Austin, the Austin Germani Memorial Fund. And as a fund, we raise money, and it's nonprofit funds. So it is tax deductible, but we have to distribute those funds to other nonprofits that are in line with our mission. And our mission being youth and young adult mental health, and specifically some areas that were very important to Austin, like emotional support animals. And that's a tricky, funny line. So I've worked with some people that are very well skilled in that arena. So my goal is to be able to provide the resources so that people know, so that there is, you know, and I haven't gotten there yet. That's an area I need to develop, is getting that stuff available online. Where are the resources for the questions that I often get reached out to about? And then the funding of helping people with that. And then also the funding of testing, genetic testing prior to kids and young adults going on to medication for mental health disorders.
We have to end it there because we are out of time.
Yeah.
We would love to have you back because I'd like to hear more about your experience developing the Wellness Care app and all of that. But I want to thank you, Ginger Germani, for coming here today and being on the Voices for Mental Health podcast and sharing your personal experience with our listeners and such wonderful advice.
Thank you, Carrie and Candace. I really appreciate what you all are bringing to our community. It's very important. Thanks.
Likewise. Thank you, Ginger.
And to all the listeners out there, remember, you are not alone.